Cool. Morning, everyone. Morning. It's good to see you. I need to hold that up a bit. Is that all right? Okay. Let me just read that again. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Go and make disciples. Just for a moment, sit with your heart. Where does that sit with you? What do you feel when you hear those things? When you hear that scripture, when maybe it takes you back to church, or your experience at Sunday school, or your life as a Christian, maybe for decades, or maybe for days? Go and make disciples. Just listen to your heart for a moment. What is that saying? What does that remind you of? How does it make you feel? No, just dwell on it for a moment. Just dwell on it. For me, there's a sense of, like, panic. It's like, I think the Great Commission can quickly become, if we're not careful, a sort of another stick that we can hit ourselves with, a bit of a religious stick. I'm not good enough. I've not done enough. I don't know enough. I've maybe got more questions than answers. And perhaps my life at times doesn't really look much different from someone who doesn't believe in Jesus. So who am I to try and make disciples, to try and live this out? And so part of it is just in that moment, just to recognise that in your heart. And not answer it or not try and fix it at this point. It's just, where am I with this? Where does it sit with me? Because that'll be different for all of us. Let me tell you a story. So there's a guy called Sean. Sean's a plumber in Devon. Awesome guy. He wasn't always an awesome guy. Sean grew up in a fishing village called Brixham. So down on the coast there, you may know it. Sean's father died early on in his life, when he was 10. Previous to that, his dad was quite aggressive in the home. And when his dad died, it really spiralled Sean into just this kind of at war with the world. And he just wasn't at peace. He got in, as you'd expect the story to go, he got into a lot of trouble. He found the places that can really breed and grow anger and hatred. And he became quite a menace in his world. To make it worse, he was an amateur stroke pro boxer, so he was able to fight, and soon realised that that's a good economy in the world that he was in. And he was able to do a lot of damage. And he built a bit of an empire around himself. And his story, his testimony is on the CVM website, on the YouTube channel. You can have a look at it. He acquired a load of stuff around his life. You know, all the things you would expect, the good and the bad. He amassed a lot of movement around his life. The orbit of Sean's life it had a lot of trash in it, a lot of stuff just floating around and hitting into him. But there were good moments too, and he had a family. And there were a few moments for Sean where his anger totally spilled out, just totally lost control. And they're in the video. That ended him up in prison, actually. So he's in and out of prison, he's plumbing, he's got money, he's in a world of crime, and he invites this guy into his home, into his flat, another career criminal. And there's always someone worse and nastier and bigger and more horrible. That's the reality in that world. And one night, this guy just totally flipped. Again, the story's there, do have a look. But it ended up with Sean waking up 3 days later in intensive care. This guy basically just destroyed him. And he'd broken his back in a certain place, ribs on one side were all gone, just broken, and just mashed him up. So Sean actually had PTSD from that attack, and the guy went to prison for it. The reason I'm telling you this, it's a bit of a harrowing story, but there is a turn. There's a turn in the story, and it's encouraging for us when we think about the Great Commission. So Sean was plumbing, and a mate of mine called Trevor was having some work done on his house, and he employed Sean to come and do it. So Sean was just plumbing on this house, just working on his house. Trevor is a crab fisherman. Trevor distributes about 70% of the UK's crabs to the UK crab market. So he lives down in Tor Bay. So Trevor was building quite a stunning place. He was building a flat and basically a leisure centre in his garden. It's phenomenal. But the point of building it all wasn't for Trevor and Celia. They're the most generous, outward-looking people I've ever met. And they use it for Christians, for people that need space, need time to just get off the crosshairs of life and just be. And so that's what they were building it for, and that's what they use it for, even now. But Sean was brought in to do the plumbing. And Sean was like, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He thought he was working for some millionaires because billionaires want more stuff. And he couldn't understand that Trevor was building this for other people. And he was commenting on it, and Trevor was standing behind him. And Trevor said, yeah, this is what I do. This is what I'm about. This is my heart. And Sean's like, why? Yeah, what's this about? He said, I'm a Christian. He said, this is what we do. At this point, Sean was living in a caravan, really low, like depression was chronic. And he'd marked in his diary a date to take his own life. And it was about 2 or 3 months in advance of where we are in the story. So Trevor and Sean are outside chatting. And Trevor, as a Christian, he just said he had this moment. And he looked at Sean and he said, are you okay, mate? Are you okay? That was all he said. That was it. And it undid Sean. On the drive, in that moment, Sean's testimony is that moment was a huge turning point in my life. Because in his narrative, in the story of Sean's life, nobody had asked him if he's okay. He was just brutalised by the life and the choices he'd made. And suddenly, Trevor was just standing there like, are you okay, mate? And he gave him a hug. And Sean was like, totally just blew him away. So what followed that, and this is a cool story, Sean got invited to the Gathering, which is, if you don't know, CVM, the charity I work for, we run a festival for men in June in a field near Swindon. So it's a weekend thing. Trevor had emailed Sean and said, I want to invite you to the Gathering. And Sean, being a bloke, didn't read the email. So when he turned up at Trevor's, the Friday of the Gathering, they were leaving to go. And Trevor assumed he was there and they were going out to the Gathering. He assumed he'd read the email and Sean was up for it. And Sean thought he was going to the pub Friday night, going out for a drink with Trevor and his Christian mates. And he was all right about that. So they bundled him in the car and then they drove from Devon to Swindon. And Sean, honestly, true story, he didn't know where he was going. He was in the back of this car trapped and he couldn't get out. And as he's driving, he'd been driven along, he's texting his daughter, she's about 20, and he's saying to her, as soon as we stop for petrol, I'm going to run, and you need to pick me up. So he's planning his escape. He'd been captured by these Christian blokes. And they get him to the Gathering, and Sean is just totally overwhelmed. He gets out, and there's 2,000 blokes there. This guy's suffering from PTSD. He's not supposed to be in crowds. And he hasn't got a tent. He hasn't got a sleeping bag. He hasn't got any change of clothes, nothing. And this community of blokes, there's a pastor with them, they give him everything. So suddenly, in the space of half hour, Sean's got all his kit, sleeping bag, tent. Someone put a beer in his hand. They're like, mate, we're really pleased you're at the Gathering. No one had been around Sean like that, no one. As Sean walked through the mess tent, we've got a couple of tents, he noticed a bloke called Swanee. Swanee is a tattoo artist from Loughborough. Swanee's bald-headed, tattoos all over his head. He just looks like a thug, but he loves Jesus. And Sean saw him, and in his heart, he said, there's a bloke who understands me. That's one of my men. That's the guy who knows me. He goes over to speak to Swanee. As Swanee speaks to him, Sean says that all he could hear, it was like his mum and his dad calling him. It was like the voice of his mum and dad calling him. And he was in tears for an hour. Sean was in tears for an hour. As Graham Kendrick started leading the worship on the Friday night, Sean ran to the front and gave his life to Jesus. It was the most powerful thing I think I've seen. The reason I share that is because Trevor, all he did, he said, "Are you all right, mate?" When Trevor got Sean to the gathering, I interviewed Trevor as well. Trevor said, as he got out of the car, I've said a prayer, "God, I got him here. Over to you. Over to you." The reason I'm sharing that is because if your expectation or your heart around the Great Commission is heavy and burdened and like, "Lord, I don't do enough. I'm not enough." You are enough. You are. All it took was, "Are you okay, mate?" So my encouragement really is that you are enough. The Great Commission is the most freeing, liberating thing. Remember last week we talked about the playfulness of Christ, the joy of Christ. So if you approach it with a stick, a religious stick that you've been hitting yourself with, please stop. So there's a little story, Great Commission. Also, I think one of the things to remember is that when Jesus said this, it wasn't like the disciples were like, "What? Like what? Wait a minute, that doesn't fit with anything you've said. Like we've followed you for 3 years. What does this mean? What's this new teaching we're hearing? Like, come back. Like you can't just drop that bombshell and go and make disciples. Like what do we do?" They knew what to do. It was what they'd seen. They'd been following Jesus. They saw the pattern of his life, the movement of his life, where he went, what he did, who he spoke to, what he said. I want to show you maybe three things in the Bible just quickly. Maybe someone would read them for me. We'll take turns. Mark 2, 13 to 17. Stuart, do you want to take that one? Mark 2, 13 to 17. Perhaps Eunice, the next one. Luke 8, 43 to 48. I'll say them again, so don't panic. Luke 8. And then, do you want to take John? John 4? Yeah, you okay with that? If you can't find it, we'll find it with you. John 4. So it's verses 7 and 9. So, Stuart, you're on Mark 2, 13 to 17. Let's have that one.
Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," Jesus told him, and Levi got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but those who are ill. I have come to call not to come to call the righteous, but sinners."
Yeah. Cool. Welcome, Jim. Come on in. Welcome. Welcome in. So that's a cool Bible verse. We're just hearing about the life of Jesus and where he was going. And I love this part. And one of the things to notice in that, it says quite often in the Bible, as Jesus walked on the journey, as he was going, on the way. And that stuff's really good. And I like to try and live by that. On the way, as I walked, as I journeyed. It takes out a lot of the intensity of the Great Commission. But also, who did he speak to? The tax collectors, sinners, a meal with a table of sinners. I mean, this is crazy wild. When you think about the time of Jesus, the setting in which he walked into, the expectations on him, the religious expectations on him. It was like Jesus just went totally the opposite way. It's like, I want to be next to sinners. I want to be next to the lost, the marginalised, the outcast, the broken, the hurting, the wounded. If you wanted to see Jesus, then that's where you needed to go. Like the expectation was, well, you'll be in the temple and you'll just stay in the temple and everyone will come to you, or you'll just hide in the synagogue. No. Jesus was in the marketplace, in the street, as he walks along, journeying with people, eating with people, which in their culture, we don't have it so much now. in our culture, but eating together was huge. Sharing a meal together is an intimate, I accept you and you accept me. That's massive. The religious elites were like, what? Like, Jesus, you can't do this. If you're who you say you are, you cannot do this. He's like, yeah, I can. I'm here for the sick. This is so encouraging. Where do you align yourself in society? Where do you put yourself in our culture? Amongst the needs of those who need Jesus, the broken, the marginalised, the sinners. Luke 8, 43 to 48. Was that you?
Oh, yeah, it's me. And a woman who was there had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. But Jesus said, someone touched me, and I know that power has gone out from me. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace.
Amazing. I mean, this is a huge bit of scripture, but just a couple of things to pull out of it. Obviously, Jesus' interaction with women was massive for the day as well. Like, he crossed huge social boundaries and borders and division. And he was okay about that. And this moment, not only was she healed, but she was restored. She was restored into community. And this is massive. Everywhere she would have sat, everywhere she would have touched would have been ceremonially unclean. She was taken out of society, separate from her family. Like, her illness and sickness pulled her out of society. And Jesus, in that moment, didn't just heal her physically, reunite her spiritually, but he brought her back into community instantly by lifting her up. Like, this is massive. We saw this in Brazil when we worked in Teen Challenge. Towards the end of our time in Teen Challenge, it was the site we lived on was turned into a centre to treat women. And seeing women restored, not just from drug addiction, but planted back into families as mums. Lots of them had loads of kids that they were estranged from. Society and culture had stopped trusting them. Their neighbours didn't want to know anymore. To see that restoration and that recovery of life was huge. And Jesus put himself in that place. That's where Jesus went. They're the footsteps of Jesus. If there was a line, Jesus was the other side of it. It's really powerful when we start looking through the Bible at where Jesus aligned himself.
What was amazing though, she didn't touch him. She touched his cloak. Didn't even need
Yeah.
skin to skin.
Yeah, just the very edge.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Eunice. One more Bible verse. It was John 4, 7 to 9. Yeah, thank you.
When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan, the woman said to him, you are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. So again, just trying to raise a point of division. And what does that look like for you? There's certainly people in my life that annoy me. And I choose to be divided from them. I choose to put distance. I choose to not stand opposed to them, but and you will know in your life if there's particular places where people are, or there's particular characters that you think they know how to press my buttons. There was huge divide between the Samaritans and the Jewish people. Huge cultural divide going back years and years and years around a place of worship, to the point where the Samaritans were considered filthy animals.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, this dispute at the moment is between
Yeah.
harm the Palestinians. Until we get that resolved, it'll be, trouble.
Yeah. So division's real. We can all associate. We can all connect with some form of division in our lives. It might not even be as far away as Israel and Gaza. It may be between you and a family member. There is division. There is division. And I wonder what it looks like for you. Just carry that in your heart for a moment. What could Jesus be saying into that? And it may be that the response is, Lord, I'm just going to pray. Jesus, I don't know. I've got no words for this. And I've seen family feuds in my family and my mum and dad. They just couldn't reach out. The communication just breaks down. And sometimes that place we pray, but that division is real. And Jesus crossed over. He found ways to cross over. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the economy of God's kingdom can form bridges where we think there is no way. There is no way. That bridge is burnt, it fell into the water and it got washed away. Like there's nothing there anymore. The economy of heaven can rebuild in the most staggering of ways. And you think, I never even saw that coming. And you may not see that in your lifetime. You may not. There's some things that we won't see this side of eternity, but in faith, we say, Lord, would you build that again? Would you restore what was lost? So when we talk about the Great Commission going out, we're armed with all this stuff. In the life of Jesus, he did it all. It's nothing new, it's all in him. There's loads of references we can find. One more. This is Matthew 8, and it says this, Matthew 8, 1-4. When Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. Right away, a man with leprosy came up and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Reaching out his hand, Jesus touched him, saying, I am willing, be made clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. I am willing. I am willing. There's a war in us. Oh, let me talk in first person. There's a war in me, and if you can resonate with it, then great. There's a war in me, and it's called self-life. The self-life. Let me explain what it looks like. So, a few Christmases ago, my brother invited us to his pub. My brother's a landlord of a pub near Cambridge, which is great if you drink. I'm teetotal, but... So we went over, and there's my family, my brother's family. We rarely get together. So it was really important. It was important for my mum and dad, important for us. I was like, can't wait to see my bro. There was this other dude there in the pub. My brother had shut the pub, but there was a bloke in there from Poland. I'm like, who's he? What's he doing here, ruining my Christmas? Honestly, that was my heart towards this bloke. I was so angry, sitting on our table, eating our Christmas dinner, my Yorkshire puddings. Honestly, I got myself really hot and bothered about it. The self-life. He was from Poland, didn't have any family here. And my brother was like, there's no way you're doing Christmas on your own, mate. You come do it with my family. We love you. I didn't love him. Not that morning. It took time for me to realise what on earth I was doing. The self-life. This is what I'm talking about. The self-life. It raises up in us. Me first. What I want. My way. My feelings, my emotions first, my needs. I'm not trying to raise too much of a point on this. What I am saying is, it feels like that's a war in me. And something I have to daily go before Jesus and say, would it be swapped round? Would it be your way and your plan? And the words of Jesus, I am willing. And I think that's sort of the antidote to the toxin of the self-life. It's Jesus, I am willing. Like, even if it means today down the co-op, there'll be someone I just say, are you okay, mate? How are you doing? What's happening in your life? I had a great example of this coming back from America last year with my mate Mark. I said to Mark, let's go and get a massage before we got on this plane. So if you've been to the airport, sometimes they have the massage people. So he said, yeah, let's go and do it. So we went into this little massage place. I instantly had made a mistake because it was like $60. I didn't have $60. And I know Mark's very generous, so he was like, I'll cover you. So he sorted it out. And these two people turn up. One lady, I'll be honest, it looked like she'd woken up in a bush and sort of crawled out backwards. She just was crazy looking, I'll be honest. You know, in your head you think massage, all in white, oils, candle lit, music, nothing like that. And then this bloke, the other massage bloke, came out, and he was like so tall and weird. He was like, who's the guy in the Addams Family? Lurch, you know the Rita? And I'm like, which one do I get? I had the guy, sat down, he had hands like shovels, and he was so strong. It was painful. For 40 minutes I was sitting there. But at the start of it, this is the point of the story. At the start of it, I was having my massage, and the lady on reception was really, really miserable. She just was. She had had a terrible day. She was just really rude, really rude. And that got my back up. And I'm like, we're paying good money for it. You know, this is a service we're paying for. Like, who do you think you are? And it rose in me. So I'm having this massage like, oh, she's got my back up. Like. And then I heard Mark talking to her. And he said, I can see you're having a terrible day. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Do you want to talk about it? And I was stunned. I was like, what? And her demeanour and her whole character shifted instantly. And afterwards I said to him, mate, you melted her with kindness. I've never seen anything like it. I was angry with her. Like my entitlement. I was angry, and I spent 40 minutes being angry. I'm only sharing it because that's the reality of how it gets you, the self-life. And when you feel it rising up, you say, Jesus, I'd just crucify this. I lay it before you, I don't want it. I am willing, Jesus, speak to me. Honestly, I spent 40 minutes angry, and afterwards I said to Mark, what did you do during that massage? He said, I was praying for the woman massaging me. I was like, oh, shut up. I was so angry. But that's the truth. A different place in the heart, So I learned a lot from that. So the reason I'm sharing that, the self-life will war in us. It will do some warring in us. And in relation to the Great Commission, hopefully you feel more armed. You feel like that voice of you're not good enough, you're not been a Bible college, you haven't got the answer to any questions, you can't. Disarm all of that. You need to disarm all of that. Follow the way of Jesus. As he walked, he was willing. He saw the needs that people have. Let me just say this in finishing. Hebrews 12 is where we'll land it. Hebrews 12 says this. Therefore, since we have also... Sorry, I'll start again. Therefore, since we have also... No, I'll start a third time. Therefore, since we also have such a large crowd of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every hindrance and the sin that so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the source and perfecter of our faith. For the joy that lay before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Fix your eyes on Jesus. And you'll hear me say this a lot, probably all the time. What I've found in my Christian life is we can amplify and put a magnifying lens on certain things. I need to be less tempted in this area. I need to do this less. I need to do that more. I need to be a better Christian. I need to be more generous. I need to be more patient and more kind and more loving. I need to say more gentle things, and I need to pray more. I need to read my Bible more. I need to turn up at church more. I need to give a tithe. And we amplify and intensify all of that stuff. And all we do is amplify and intensify all that stuff, and our failings and our limitations and our inability to live those things out. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Amplify him. If that's all you do, that is the best thing you will ever do. Seek Jesus. Carve out secret time, intimate time with him. Keep it special. Keep it for you. Keep it regular, daily. In the morning, Jesus, here I am. Maybe you have to set an alarm early. I have to. Get up before the kids. I've got some prayers I read. I've got a saints list that I work through. I write people's names in because I forget things, so I just write them in. I've got other books that I dip in. I try and read my Bible. Listen to music, take communion. All these sacred rhythms, just seek Jesus. And then what you'll find is those other things that you were amplifying, They just fit in. They just fit in. He brings things together. So that's what he does. So go after Jesus. He's the true north, the balance in our lives. The Great Commission isn't an add-on. It's not another thing to do or get done. It's him. It's Jesus. Let's talk to him.